Welcome to Applied. I'm Baron Gogan. I'm here today with Mark Schreiber, who serves as the K-12 Entrepreneurship Specialist, where he strives to help schools and students to add more entrepreneurial programs and mindsets into their schools and classrooms. Mark has consulted for the U.S. Air Force Academy, Intel Corp., the American School in Japan, and many other schools and institutions to help bring more design and innovation into classrooms worldwide. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, as we were saying a little bit before, that I was the Director of Innovation and Design at American School in Japan, helped them launch that program. And the program was really about design thinking, human-centered design, building things, making things. But then it gets to the end of that and you want to do something with it. You want to promote it. You want to make it go further. And then you want to have capital that comes back from that potentially. So really, that kind of started everything. And then I've got a chance to go to the Air Force Academy there down in the Springs right before a giant snowstorm. So I'm glad I got back.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it was back in like 2019, I guess. It was this giant spring snowstorm. And got to do that with their CyberWorks program. So they have a big program they're working on to get more hands-on human-centered design in with their cadets, trying to help them really not just solve a problem that doesn't need to be solved, but solve something that needs to be solved. And then until I continue right now, even to this day, as of just yesterday, working on a curriculum to help them get more entrepreneurship and hands-on education into schools.
How do you define entrepreneurship?
I mean, entrepreneurship can be this kind of, sexy Silicon Valley thing, right? And
right.
I don't look at it that way. I really see it just as a way of, there's risk takers that want to step into the unknown and to bring something new into the world. And that's how I define it more. There's definitely a business component of it. There's capital and there's needs and a whole bunch of things that have to be done. But at the root of it, entrepreneurship is really about taking ground that hasn't been taken.
Innovation.
Yeah, being innovative. And, I think there's a lot of younger people, even that I see, that they just do that, right? They're not afraid because they didn't learn that they can't. So it's just that, okay, I'm going to do it. It's going to be messy, but I'm going to succeed. And I think maybe you get bit enough after a while. Maybe you stop becoming as entrepreneurial and maybe become a little more safe, But yeah, I think entrepreneurship's a risky, bold look at something that hasn't been done and how you can bring it into the world to make it a better place.
So what would you say to people who say it's too risky, and maybe they are a little critical of how some people are a little fast and loose with funding and money and things like that? So entrepreneurship is one of those things that has pros and cons, obviously.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, you definitely see that Wild West side of it. And it's, it's like, wow, everything's the Uber of blank now. So it can't just be the crazy idea. It's got to be rooted in the fundamentals. But I would say to the person that says, well, hey, it's too crazy, it would be maybe you need to be a little more crazy to start and then rein it in, right? It's not about nobody sprints forever, right? But to sprint off in a direction, pause, evaluate, sprint off, and maybe you're zigzagging down the track is going to be way better than just sitting there planning out on paper and never having even executed it. So
right. Never taking that next step.
Yeah. Once again, risk. Bold isn't dumb, right? Risk is something about, and there's certain people. There's people that take ground. There's people that hold ground. So I probably wouldn't compete, and I probably wouldn't give much thought to the people that would say, are you just a little too loose? I'd be, well, I need you later, right? We need you later. We're all in this team. You can't do it forever. You can't just keep sprinting down the thing and unchecked.
Right. You have to have a balance.
Yeah.
But you have to have people who are willing to take that risk and to put themselves out there to try something that might work. It might not, but it won't work if you don't try.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what sets entrepreneurship apart from the broader topic of business? You said there's obviously overlap with entrepreneurship and business, but they're not the same. What makes those two things different?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that same, question we were just talking about with entrepreneurship and that Wild West kind of side of it. The difference to me is there's the fundamentals in entrepreneurship. You need to be able to have the books reconciled and move forward and have money to fund the things that you're trying to fund, and you have to scale in a proper way. Business, though, I would say is more the second part, the back end. We have a tool we use called the Business Model Canvas, and it's just a snapshot of what's all in a business, and has a value proposition and your customer segments and your key markets and your channels and how you're going to talk to people about it, and then has your revenue streams, but then it also has all your key partnerships, and it has your, all of your, are you going to make money, and how much money are you spending, and what do you do on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, like what's your day to day. The business to me is that day to day operations, need to get it going. It's the holistic portion of it, but maybe it's the aircraft carrier, right? And entrepreneurship's more the destroyer, kind of moves around. But at some point, you still need to be able to have them both in the room.
Right. And what was the model that you mentioned?
The Business Model Canvas, BMC.
Okay. Is that something that is open source and accessible to people?
Oh, yeah. It's been around. Long live the BMC, right? It's been around for a long time. It's just an easy way to look at a business and make sure that you have all your components. You could even say, back to the point of entrepreneurship, you could be a little scattered in the entrepreneurship. They're just it's a big ball of wax. You're trying to do all these things.
Right.
So to be able to really pull it apart and say, okay, center to the Business Model Canvas, the center square, it's like a landscape piece of paper with 9 squares on it. Mm-hmm. And the very center of it is your value proposition. So what value are you bringing? And if you don't know your value, you probably shouldn't start your business.
So that's the starting point.
Yeah, that'd be your check and balance, right?
Okay.
And then your customer segments. So who does your pain point, your value prop map over to and relate to? And that's that human-centered design. That's why we're also talking about design
We talk
thinking.
about that in marketing a lot.
Yeah.
It's important. You have to have that from the get-go.
And really, that once you get that becomes your marketing collateral. That becomes your messaging. That becomes everything, because you clearly articulate and communicate. And then you can look at the cost of how you're going to sell it. Is it just a physical exchange? I give you a water bottle and you pay me $5 and thank you very much. Or is it somewhere software as service? Or is it some other model of revenue lease? Mm-hmm. What are all these things? Once you kind of have that triad, and you go, okay, I think I know how I would do it. Well, then you can start talking about, how do I message people? How do I market to them? Right. But then the left side of the Business Model Canvas is the other big squares, and that's your key partners, and that's your cost analysis of, and wow, it's going to cost me $5,000 per unit to do this, but I'm only getting paid $5. Well, probably don't have a business, right? Yeah. So it's just an easy way to kind of a go, no go check, and to be authentic and honest with yourself. I'm teaching Venture Validator over at the Institute for Entrepreneurship starting on Monday, and we do these validator classes, which can tend to be a little bit of a clarity session instead of as much about skills as compared to saying, because everybody brings their little awesome business. This is my baby. Look at this. This is so awesome. Everybody wants it. And then we put it in the magnifying glass and we say, well, let's ask people, do they want it? And if they do, why do they want it? And how could you make better features? And if they don't, then you need to take a step back. So the Business Model Canvas is really just a way to kind of magnify the good and the bad, and make sure that it's really good before you move forward with it. And back to the point of not just running off with all the money before you have a plan and burning capital, right? So really make sure that you have a plan.
So if someone has an idea that they think has a lot of potential, at what point do they start looking at that business model process? Pretty early?
Yeah. You go to the brewery, do your napkin sketch, and then once you have that all done and you're like, this is awesome, and you go back and you want to drop your $10,000 into prototyping something, you pause, you pull out the Business Model Canvas, and you walk through it and you put everything down in its box and you look at it and you say, yeah, I think this has legs. I think this could walk on its own, this idea. Mm-hmm. And then you probably go interview and you probably ask people, hey, what do you think? And the Business Model Canvas is really just an iterative tool to continue to check yourself of, is this business going to be good or successful, at least before you spend a bunch of money on it.
Takes some of the risk out.
Takes a lot of the risk out. Yeah, and it helps you to slow down too, right? Not go half-cocked.
Right, or miss a crucial step.
Yeah, okay. And oftentimes they're used in, probably not in the banking world as much, but instead of this giant business plan back in the day of 60-page business plan with all of your stuff, you can give maybe you do it in a little bigger than 8.5 by 11, like a landscape version so people can read. You should be able to put down everything that somebody that was going to invest in your company could look at and say, oh yeah, you could turn your business model canvas into a very successful pitch, because you'd be able to communicate everything that you wanted to. What your market segment is, what's the market share, what's your customer competition, competitive landscape, all these things.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, because that's the next step. Right after that is investing. And
yeah, unless you're going to self-fund somehow, you're going to go for some sort of investing. And it's vogue in a lot of ways, these pitch festivals and Shark Tank kind of thing. That's what they're doing. I could look at any Shark Tank and I could, in 30 seconds after hearing their pitch, write down at least I'd say 60% of the business model canvas. Just boom, boom, boom.
Okay.
Because they told me it all right there, if they did it right. So.
And the investors know if they don't.
Yeah, the investors,
if they're missing a piece.
Yeah, and they'll ask follow-up questions of different things that are needed. Hey, who's your competition? You didn't talk about that. Who's this? Who's that? Yeah.
I've watched a little bit of Shark Tank, and it's pretty interesting. I've noticed that they pick up on things like holes pretty quickly, and then they hone in on that.
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, it seems like they want to see some evidence that person has had some kind of success to show. If someone doesn't have any capital, or they're pretty much just a self-startup, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, so that's where you'd have to get into investing. And I mean, sometimes it could be as easy as mom and pop investing to say, hey, I need $5,000. I want to try this thing out. And crowdfunding is a great way.
True.
Kickstarter or Indiegogo, right? Those platforms are great because you're basically testing out your value proposition right from the get-go. You're testing out your customer segments. You're testing out your marketing collateral, your vision and your view, and you can have a rudimentary prototype that, you can actually have a pretty nice looking prototype that's smoke and mirrors. And you can tell people, this is what it's going to look like. I've built one and it cost me $5,000. And then I won't even launch this thing unless I get $25,000.
Right.
And so you can say, hey, what's it really going to cost me? I can't do this thing unless I get $25,000. There's definitely a marketing side of Kickstarter. You got to get the word out to people.
Yes.
But if you get it out and if it gets picked up and people like it and you hit a total need and strike a nerve, then you could have a great product. Did you ever see the ostrich pillow?
No.
No, you should look up the ostrich pillow. It was Banana Studios, and they just wanted to make this fun proof of concept idea, and it was going to be for napping. And they called it the ostrich pillow, and you put it over top you, and it just had like an eye slit and a place for your hands. It made you look like an ostrich. It was this big thing that you ran over your nap, and then you could lay down and you could take a nap, and you're more productive if you take naps. And they showed a few stats in there. Well, they just put this idea out there, and then Design Milk and Wired and all these people picked it up, but it was just a pretend thing. Everybody picked it up and it went viral.
So it was just a concept.
It was just a concept. So they decided to do a Kickstarter crowdfunding. They crowdfunded it, $1 million plus.
Wow.
In 48 hours. You have to look it up. But now they're a $2.5 million company a year.
Really?
Selling a napping pillow that was just dorky looking, right? So you don't know who is going to like your product until you try it. And this one just had a lot of interest in it, I think, because it was really well designed and so funny and off, but actually useful. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just, and now they've gone into other components. They don't just sell these pillows.
Right. They've scaled.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting.
So crowdfunding is a great way.
Yeah. I've seen some really cool products get launched that way.
Yeah.
So is entrepreneurship really taught in K through 12 schools, or do you think that's not really something that's being taught?
Entrepreneurship, it's in K-12, but it's not a class. Typically, you'll have your business class, which maybe goes back to the word processing days of old. That was the early business class, but it's going to be a lot of marketing. Your 4 Ps of marketing is going to be your spreadsheets, and it's going to be the business side. The entrepreneurship is not as much in there. That's what we're trying to change.
Right.
It doesn't have its place, but it has a place everywhere. So that's one thing going for trying to infuse entrepreneurship. It really does fit in well. A lot of programs will put it into their ag programs because there's just already a entrepreneurial side of any production entity out that's doing rural farming or whatever, your business, right? You're doing all these things. So having that entrepreneurial side. So it's not the ostrich pillow side of things, but yeah, at the same time, that's fun. Everybody's seen Shark Tank, and can you do that? If you have something where you're building things in your school, you can add that in, but why not in biology and talk about genetics, or maybe talk about water quality? Let's do a product that could test water for lower cost and just help them work through that exercise of this learning that we did, how it can be applied and how it can be put in back into the world to make it a better place, right? And I think you can go a long ways when kids are just, check the box worksheet, where you can really take it off the page and go, okay, let's do something with this. So I'll do a lot of guest lectures and usually unpack the business model canvas and help them understand, but it's up to them to find a project that they can add it into, roll it into, that still works with their curriculum and maybe brings a little bit more to life. So
you could incorporate entrepreneurship in essentially every subject that they're learning as a way to bring in kind of a real world component to the learning.
Yeah, and you could even look at a history of the wallet, right? So why is the wallet the shape it is? What cultures have a coin purse versus a wallet? What do they carry in it? How did it change and evolve over time? And then what would the future wallet be? And you could talk about that, and you could just do a unit on looking through history. So you're still talking history,
right? And
you can bring in all the tie-ins there. But at the end of the day, you could actually have them fabricate and build an upcycled one for a sustainability-minded customer, or you could have them build one for the wallet of the future. So, you could do it in a foreign language class. You could do it in so many different things. I did a unit one time with students where they had to do a lot of skill-based processes, like a shop kind of thing. So vacuum forming, laser cutting, vinyl cutting, 3D printing, but instead had them take a look at a place they want to travel to and pretend like the hotel is hiring them to rebrand their hotel, and they want a box of chocolates to go with it as part of this rebrand. So now they have to make the box, make the chocolates, make the 3D prints to make the vacuum form, to mold the chocolates, to put the logo, to, all that stuff, and then run a cost analysis on it. How much is this going to cost? And so you can it can bring things to life a lot easier. And I think it gets people's, especially students' imaginations going, where it's not just tell me the 5 skills you learned and show me you can do them.
Right. Yeah, a lot goes into launching a business or creating a product. People don't always necessarily understand how much goes into it and all the things that have to kind of fall into place. I imagine learning about that earlier on in your education can be extremely beneficial.
I mean, I would love to see it more and more at younger ages, just because I think it does get maybe taught out of us, right? This risk-taking entrepreneurial spirit. We're in such a interesting phase of society, and you get the helicopter parents, right? Phrase. You get the lawnmower parents that blaze the trail in front of their kids instead of just hovering over them. Oh yeah, lawnmower. You really don't want that parent. I probably was that parent, but because you want the best for your kids. But in that, where nobody's climbing trees, and that's great. They're not falling out of trees, but everybody's risk averse is being taught, right? And so if risk averse is being taught, and we are the innovative, creative country, right? And our peers aren't our neighbors down the road, but across the pond, like Friedman said in The World's Flat book, right? We're competing on a global scale. Then if creativity is American, right, and can be a good thing for us even as we're going, if we can keep that going, then that's, to me, that just feels like something that can really keep the students doing good things for the world in the future, rather than just replicating what's been done.
Right.
Especially with the pace of everything changing.
Right. Encouraging youth to get involved with innovation and creating things, and not just studying for tests and memorizing things.
Yeah, exactly.
would you say is the biggest barrier for more young people becoming entrepreneurs?
I think we're moving in that direction with more portfolios and things that value students' uniqueness instead of standard, right? When you have standardized tests and everything should be standard. And I think there's a place for a foundational level of learning, right? But if you're hiring, I'm hiring, we're probably hiring somebody that has an edge that's a little different, that really can do this one thing that's going to help our company, right? Or it's going to be a good thing. So I don't want standard, I want standard plus, right? So I think a barrier is just that students, part of it's just the grade system, right? We have A's, B's, C's. So students want to know, well, what do I do to get an A? And we give them a rubric and they get an A, and that's great. But there's no rubric in life that says that this is an A, especially in entrepreneurship. The A's that's a glass ceiling, right? That needs to be blown through. You need to go someplace totally different. So I think that's the rub that's a bit hard, and that's a big barrier, is just because we've told students that this is how you get the A.
Or score higher on a test.
And that's the value compared to creativity. And to be devil's advocate of my own thing here is it's really hard to evaluate creativity, right? I can evaluate on a test when I norm it out. Mm-hmm. Well, you didn't study, you studied. So there is truth to that. But I think if that's all we say, it's not that plus, then that's a big barrier.
Yeah.
And that's maybe back to the business question. Entrepreneurship isn't just running off on your own thing and just being as creative as possible and spending all the money and never producing anything. And yay, that was really fun. It's about having that rooted, especially with a team of people that can help execute it and make it work, right? And continue it on to scale it to bring better, hopefully good to the world through what you're making or service you're providing, right? So I think if we can get students to realize that, hey, there's more to it than just the grade or just the check. And that's why these even new styles of businesses out there, right, that aren't nonprofit and aren't for-profit, they're like not for-profit instead of nonprofit, right? These are they B Corp out there. So you can actually say, hey, I'm starting a business that actually has more than just the bottom line financials. It's financials plus good.
Right.
And I think when we do that, that helps students to go, oh, I should do something different than just get the A. I should get the A plus, or I should get the A because I can then move on to do these other things.
Yeah, the education system has kind of evolved to favor the more objective side of things. You have the test is very objective. It's either the answer is right or wrong, and that adds up to a score. Yep. And then there's the subjective side, which is maybe writing a paper or doing a project or something creative is harder to give a grade or a number value to that. And so it seems like we've moved a little too far toward the objective side and the test side, and we've de-emphasized some of the creativity and the critical thinking and that side of it maybe.
Yeah. I think objective, subjective is part of it, but I also think it's product versus process, right? So we value the product. Everybody wants the shiny thing at the end. And it's nebulous and hard to grade the process, right? How do you grade a process? But the process is the biggest thing. When you and I assume you know how to ride a bike, right? When we learned to ride a bike, our parents didn't just like focus on holding us all the way along, and we never learned to ride a bike. They let us crash, right? Yeah. They didn't want us to crash. They didn't like purposely wobble us as we pushed down the way. They wanted us to succeed. So we want students to succeed, but we're not willing to allow them to fail along the way.
And you learn from failure.
And that's where you learn best, right? And that's what entrepreneurs have to learn too. Most, I think, I'd have to look up stats, but so many entrepreneurs have it's their serial business, right? And they failed on how many of the other ones, and then this one is the golden star that they all get to talk about. But if you look at their Wikipedia page, they have many failures along the way.
Right.
Typically.
How can entrepreneurship be more accessible and have better diversity?
Once again, I think having a purpose. When we just build things and we're like, wow, it's just so fun to build things. Some people aren't going to be feel included in that. That's just not where they want the relational. So when you say, hey, let's look at the Sustainable Development Goals, which the UN just put out, right? Well, now, not just, maybe 5-10 years ago, but they have hunger, big issues, poverty, right? Access, equality, all these things, clean water. Well, if you give that to a group of students, there's going to be some students, boys and girls, of all different races, that are going to just latch onto different ones, and they're going to find that passion drive them forward, and that's going to help them want to actually do something. And I think entrepreneurship comes from solving problems that you see. Right. So if you never have any problems, or you don't see any problems, or you only see them from one way, and you realize that, wow, in who I am and my circumstances and my upbringing, my culture, I look at things a lot different than the rest of the room that I'm sitting in here. I think maybe I should do something about that, right? I think that helps bring inclusivity, because they realize their own power in their own culture and their own understanding of how they view the problem, that other people aren't viewing it in that same way.
Right. So that's probably where the leadership component can come in. Say, I'm really good at these things. I have this knowledge, but I need to pull other people in who are good at these other things, who have this other knowledge that I don't have. I can't be the expert in everything. Right. And so pulling the people together. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, once again, our education, and this happens in a lot of rooms, and in some rooms it doesn't, but as we try to educate students, helping them to see that they're powerful, that they have a unique something they bring. And maybe it's not leadership. That's just not who they are, who they want to be. But this other person over here, she's really good at leadership, and she's bringing this. And maybe there's somebody that's just the idea person, and they just love what they're doing and just generate ideas all day long. Mm-hmm. And when they realize that I don't have to be everything, I have to be enough, I have to be that baseline plus, and then plus this edge that I bring, and then I need others, and I can't just do it by myself, then I think that's where things start to shine. That's where people really can make better value to the world, better businesses, because they're not just trying to Lone Ranger doing the whole thing themselves all the time.
So from an education standpoint, I imagine projects where students are collaborating as a group are really beneficial for that.
Yeah, collaboration's huge, and it's hard, right? But I would rather students be a little frustrated and have to figure out what resilience in a group is, and what a good conversation's about, and what, how to have constructive criticism instead of just blast every idea down, and how to be quiet when you don't want to be quiet, and listen to the room and invite everybody in, and all those skills. Those are bigger, I would say, than a lot of the actual knowledge that they're learning. Those are the things that need to be done, and to be done in a way that can be, well, at the end of the day, it's just a grade, I could say, I guess. It's not you're not cutting your teeth on the real thing. This is practice, right? And if we could actually treat some of these times as practice, where they can have that ability, even in a rubric or even in your standard, the ability to fail and to learn and grow from that collaboration, I think that's great, because otherwise people come out going, I hate groups. I hate collaborating. And I go, well, you guys don't all have the same passion. You were just thrown together into this group. But what did you learn about interpersonal? What did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about how you could communicate better? And
those are the skills they're going to have to use when they get into the workforce.
Right.
They're probably going to use those way more than some of the other things they're learning.
Right. Exactly. So collaboration's key. And it's hard. And I'm going to class after this, teach design thinking, and they have to be in groups. And I've got computer science majors with natural resource, with health and wellness, exercise, sports science, apparel merchandising, all in these same groups from way different cultural backgrounds and experiences, and even different goals. And yet they have to all work together. And I get a lot of emails sometimes, even at the college age, right? Of saying, this is so hard. Well, it's like, hey, it's a class. You'll get through it, but let's learn from it instead of just focusing on, like, this is the process.
Right.
It's human-centered. You need to start with you. You're human. They're human. Let's figure it out.
tell us a little more about design thinking and how that works.
Yeah, design thinking is also called human-centered design. It was out of IDEO, D School at Stanford was a part of that. And they coined the phrase, but it was basically thinking like a designer. So did you ever have the Microsoft Zune? Did you ever know the Microsoft Zune? It was paired up against the iPod back in the day.
Yeah, I heard about that. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Microsoft made it. It was a MP3 player. It had 8 megs of RAM or something, and it had all these amazing sweet tech specs. And nobody bought it. Well, people bought it, but not that many people bought it. And then Apple had it, and they had, sleeker design, corners, but they had their tagline, 1,000 songs in your pocket, right? So it didn't matter, all the tech. Everybody just was like, oh, what can this do for me? That was human-centered design, and they were just designers. And so because they understood, some people cared about all the tech specs, but most people just wanted to know, how does this help me? Oh, I've got 1,000. I don't carry around CDs or tapes or whatever. I've got them all in my pocket. Great.
Right. And how is it packaged? What does it look like? That was a big thing for Apple.
Yeah, it still is. They're boxes.
Day one, basically.
Boxes. How many boxes of Apple do I have? I should throw them away.
People just love Apple products.
I know.
They have for a long time.
Right. But I think they understood design inherently just because that's what they did. And their iterations, and you can watch some interesting YouTube documentaries on just their iterations. They have like a place where they have all these old Apple products, and you can see how they've evolved over time and what the different use cases for them. But human-centered design is really starting with the human process, that value proposition still paired with the customer person, the persona, the segment of who and why they need it, and really communicating that to them. Human-centered design takes you through a process that starts with empathy. So really putting yourself in another person's shoes and seeing what they see. And once again, that's back to that value of every student, every person, to say, look, you're looking at this a different way. How do you see this problem? And they go, well, I see it like this. Oh, I see it like this. Now you can start to either niche down, or you can go, well, maybe we need to expand our vision of how this product or service is going to help people. So you start it with your empathy for the problem, for the person, and then you move into, defining the problem, testing the problem, prototyping, ideating. They're all in there. So kind of walking through a process, and at the very end, you basically are using rough prototypes for paper and tape to use them for feedback to get more empathy. So it's this big empathy loop. So instead of taking $1,000 and building one and seeing that people don't really like it, I can build it in 10 minutes with construction paper and tape and markers, and I can show you a rough facsimile of it, and we can look at it together, and you can say, tell me about this. And they tell you, oh, what's that do? And they can ask questions, and you can hear, and you can really start to understand them more because you're talking through this object.
Okay, so a more agile process.
Yeah. And so design thinking, really, the two big components of it, I would say, would be empathy and prototyping. And prototyping is this really low fidelity, crafty prototyping that starts conversation. And I like to say it like this. I've had the best conversations with a lot of people sitting in the front seat of the car, driving down the road, because we're not looking at each other, and we're not having this standoff staring thing. We're actually looking at something else together, and we're having just a conversation. And there's enough to keep my mind kind of going we can really talk, right? When you give somebody something that obviously looks like paper and tape, they can rip it apart all they want, and they're not ripping you apart, right? Mm-hmm. They're just really giving constructive feedback, because you're like, well, yeah, obviously we both think this is dumb looking, but here's the process. Here's my thought.
What's working here?
What's working, what's not working. And they can tell you and go, oh yeah. And then you can update it, rip off some tape, put another sticky note on, put another symbol on, give it back to him. What do you think about this feature? Oh yeah, I like that feature, right? So just a lot. You can do a lot with the rapid prototyping.
I imagine there are some pretty good tools to do prototyping, like 3D prototyping models with computers and things now.
There are, but once again, you're looking at it, if you put it across an axis like XY axis, you wouldn't want to spend so much time on 3D design, because your time versus your realness. So if it takes me a lot of time to get to really real, well, that's great. That's my minimum viable product. I need that at some point. But at the beginning, I want the arc to go like an inch over in time, like an hour over in time, and I want it to go straight up the graph to as high amount of realness as I can.
Okay.
Because that last little eking out, that last 10% of realness is going to take me a really long time, but I can crank out a ton of realness in 2 hours or 2 days, right? So there are some things we could do 3D design. I could ask some AI bots now to, take my product and turn it into something cooler looking, right? Or I could put it on a cool background. I mean, I think I could smoke and mirrors a lot of it, but the goal of it is to not trick people, but instead to get feedback for things that you can then change and not worry about it because you didn't spend so much time on it that you don't
There's
care
no
about
sunken
it.
cost fallacy.
No sunken cost. Yeah.
And the hands-on probably helps too.
Yeah. It's not so, like, if I spend months on this thing and you tell me that you don't like this feature, that feature took me like 2 weeks. What are you saying you don't like that feature?
Yeah.
Right? Compared to like, oh, that's a sticky note. Let me throw it away. You're right. Yeah. Okay. 20 people told me they don't like that feature. You could hand them and say, press the first button that you think is the coolest. And you could just map it. And you could just quantitatively knock down every time. And if nobody ever presses that other button, maybe that's not a button they would need in the real world. So then you would make it. And there's a lot of great tools out there that can even make smoke and mirrors kind of apps that once you kind of get a basic idea, you can just do like a PowerPoint on your phone. And when I touch this text box, send it to page 3 and then run it on my phone or on a computer. When people are touching things, it acts like an app, error apostrophes, right? But it's not. It's just PowerPoint running back to home. Click over here, click there. So I can see where
Are you talking about Adobe XD?
Well, not
something
even
similar.
We could do Adobe XD, but why? I mean, we could just do PowerPoint.
Sure.
There's actually one called UI Zard. That's an AI version. You type in 250 characters of what you want your app to look like and how it to function, and then it builds it for you.
Really? Wow.
In like 30 seconds. You get about 6 or 7 screens that are all linked together, and they have little arrows and maps that go, if I click this button over to this screen, just like XD.
Yeah.
Those are kind of your Wizard of Oz prototypes. You can do these ones to see what works, and then you can change it.
So to sum it up, it's essentially about understanding the human element first at the start and then quickly getting feedback so that you can iterate faster.
Yeah. So start with empathy and then give them something so you can gain more empathy and continue to rotate through until you think you've gained enough empathy to spend more time on it. And once you go, yeah, I think there's a lot of people that want this. I mean, you could even do one, crowdfund it, and that's your more additional empathy. If only 2 people click on your families at home for this book or product or board game, but every college student funding level is just cranked off the chart, then you know your user and you've struck your chord.
Yep.
So it's just a great feedback loop that, like you said, doesn't take any sunk time.
So it sounds like schools might want to consider adding some design thinking elements to the learning.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, design thinking's once again another easy thing to weave in, and it's well used in corporate world. It's very vogue, but also very useful, and it's not magical, but it's something that helps linear, maybe non-creative or people that aren't feeling creative people to have a system and structure and a sequence to walk through to make them have more empathy and more feedback and more understanding. So you can put it into, once again, any class as looking at an artifact from the past, or you could look at a culture through it. They could do it remote with texting each other, but they also can learn some really great skills of just having to interview. Like, man, who interviews anymore? When my students, undergrad, have to go out on campus day 5 of class and talk to strangers.
Yep.
Right?
It's not just for journalists.
No. And coming out of pandemic and just the space that was created in so many different ways, it's a skill that they need to re-engage in. And text and screens and everything, those are great. I think there's great tools in there, but this is another thing. Like, why lean into the things that we're doing all the time? Lean into things we're not. So students making yourself just actually talk to people and have a follow-up question, right? Listen not to respond, but to understand. I mean, that could go so many great ways just in culture and politics and everything else if we would just listen and understand instead of to respond and to give our opinion across. And that's what design thinking is all about, is about really trying to understand somebody else from their point of view, which pushes your cultural view of everything. And you can start to go, oh, yeah, right. I see it from a totally different way.
Get out of your echo chamber a little bit.
Oh, so much. Yeah.
So then tying design thinking into entrepreneurship, what does that usually look like? I imagine entrepreneurs can really benefit from understanding design thinking.
Yeah, I think it's just the missing piece that is there, and we've talked about it or around it all the time. But if you went back to just entrepreneur, even engineers, right? They've got this great technology. It's going to solve everything. We're going to make a bunch of them. Well, if you don't know who you're making it for or why they would want it, at least maybe it's going to be great, but maybe you're missing the boat completely, or maybe you could hone it down and make it actually better for a whole bunch of people that you wouldn't have made it for before. So tying that design thinking, human-centered focus into entrepreneurship really helps just make better ventures, right? We do Venture Validator at the College of Business because we're trying to validate your idea. And we're going to do that through interviewing and really listening to other people to see, does this idea have legs or not? So when they're paired together, I think they're just real powerful and strong and helpful.
So it's getting into a little bit of the user experience area of something. It's great to have a problem that you're trying to solve, and maybe you even have the solution, but if people can't understand how to use the solution, it's not going to work.
Exactly. Yeah. UX, user experience, UI, user interface, all those things are part of there. And I think you can use that as a prototype and not have to build out the whole thing, but instead just build out parts of it to kind of get unique feedback. And maybe you're going to find one totally different marketplace, and your customers, not always your buyer. There's a video we show about Owlet baby monitors, which was a thing. And these, I think they're grad students. They were in Pitch Fest, and they did it for a class project. And they said, "Hey, what if we use this technology, this cool technology, to monitor bio signs, right? Instead of using the pulse ox things, we'll use a Bluetooth one, and we'll sell it to hospitals, and the cords and won't be tangled, and it'd be awesome." And they went to hospitals, and they talked to a bunch of the nurses, and the nurses was like, "Yes, I would love that. Super pain point. I hate those things. The tape sticks off. Nobody wants the pulse ox on the cords and whatever." And then they went to the buyers, the administrators of the hospital, and they were like, "We don't want it. No, we don't want it because it costs too much, and we already have this system, and to replace that." And so though it was a need for the nurses, or perceived need, it wasn't for the hospital. Now, they could have ran off and made this thing that all the nurses wanted, and nobody would have bought it because they missed one little component, right? So instead they pivoted and they struck that out, and they said, well, who else could be our buyer? Well, looks like parents would like it. What if we did it for monitoring babies, for SIDS, and for all those things? So then they mocked it up, they put it on a website, and it leaked out, and they got 500 emails in their inbox and overnight, because all these news agencies picked it up, that They had this wireless baby monitor that was going to be able to help tell you if your baby was breathing or well, right?
Yeah.
Or not. And then they
Which
went
is something all parents worry about.
Right. And they struck this giant chord of parents, and parents are like, you just give it to me. I'll test it right now. I can't sleep at night. I'm anxious.
Yeah.
My baby's over here. Right. They did all these things. So you've got to find who that is, and just by interviewing and asking, and not just building it to build it, right? But building it because there's somebody that needs it, that not just needs it, but that will buy it. So you can test all that stuff out.
And it's having an impact, possibly saving lives.
Right. Yeah, Intel did one on a car seat in the back that would like wirelessly tell you if you left your child in the car because you get busy and you're running around errands. You're usually by yourself, and you just happen to take your toddler. They go to sleep, and heaven forbid you lock them in the car, right? And that's happened. People have had to break windows and keep babies safe. And now in a lot of cars now, they'll have a little rear passenger ding. When you open the door, it goes ding, ding, check the rear seat. You're like, oh, well.
Yeah.
But that took a while because why did the car manufacturers want to put it in there? Right? So, and it's a complex thing, but you've got to look at it from all these different archetypes, personas, and needs. And as you do that would be super expensive if you ran the numbers of trying to actually make something for all these things compared to just having these easy to use prototypes and bring them out that way.
Right. It's easier for people to get on board when they can really see and touch something, as opposed to a PowerPoint.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah, exactly.
What type of career paths would you use design thinking? Is it every career path or? Yeah,
I think anybody can. I think it should be, right? It's just like it's hard to answer, right? Yes. I also want to hesitate a little bit because it's a system that helps people be creative. But I also, the more I've gone through it, I think there's just people that are a little more creative.
Yeah.
And there's people that are a lot more creative. And so it comes back to the collaboration question. Would you entertain being in a room with people that are really good design thinking, but that you're just got to understand the system and you're going to be working on the back end of it after the ideas? That's fine, right? But I think everybody can do it. When you're looking at new products, OtterBox, they started out with phone cases, and now they have coolers, and they have medical supply coolers, and they have all these different things. They're still doing phone cases, but they have to continue to pivot and change, and you can't just sit on one thing and not innovate, or your company is going to go away. So I think any company that wants to survive should probably use design thinking.
Yeah.
So where in the company, and is it every seat in the company? No. But I think it definitely needs to be something. And I think having everybody in the room understand that there is a process that's going to help us examine in a rational way, without our heart and without just the bottom line money, but in a rational way of what are we doing and how does this help people and why would they want it? And if they want it, they'll give us money, which will allow us to build more things so that we can help more people, right? And a good cycle at the end of the day. And we have to make money, but money's not bad. Money helps us do things for people.
But it's not everything.
So if people can understand that there's a system that really does value people and people's thoughts, and that our company is going to use it, that's really helpful for everybody.
If you had to pick one industry or sector or vertical that really could use more design thinking, what's one that you would say?
Education. No.
It's probably true.
It's probably true. We could. I think education, healthcare, anything that's just entrenched in the ways that it's been done and is really hard to change. So you're not going to just go radically change a hospital because we're already doing pretty good, and maybe pretty good's good enough when you're like, you want the best plus.
Hospitals are extremely risk averse.
Yeah, extremely risk averse, right? But like, if you're trying to do it for yourself, you're exclusive, right? And so institutions of higher learning can become exclusive. Hospitals can become, we've got the best treatment. We've got whatever. In the 1970s, 94% of kids that got leukemia died, right? And there's certain hospitals that did fairly good at saving them with the new techniques and treatments. But it wasn't until they set up COG, which is a childhood oncology group, that actually started to disseminate and use knowledge together, where they said, okay, what's your gold standard? Okay, now we're going to use that everywhere, and we're going to try the gold standard plus, and continue to build it. Now they're at 90+% of kids make it, right? Wow. So, but it took something as bad as our kids aren't surviving childhood cancer. That's what it took to do it. So I think I would hope that in a risk-averse environment that has a system like this, that has a low barrier of entry and a real high ceiling of what you can do. I would hope that at least the thoughts could be put out there to see what the gold standard plus could be.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think hospitals, big business, but anything that's risk averse.
And with a lot of bureaucracy.
Which, takes a long time to turn an aircraft carrier. But there's ways. Why not? Intel, I work with Intel. They used to have a free agent nation. That's what they called it. It was this little pocket of you working 50% doing your job, but you can go free agent on the other 50% and pick up projects that you're gifted for, set up for, but also can just have a chance to try some new things. Right? So we'd have people that were in different groups, and they'd come in, help the foundation side of Intel, which is what I was helping with their curriculum, and they'd come and bring their expertise and knowledge to these things. So why couldn't? And it's a company of 500,000 people. So they've got some bureaucracy and some systems, which you need. You need systems, right? Otherwise, it all blows up. So can you find some little pockets of innovation and allow it to happen with still having the aircraft carrier go in the right way? And I think those little pockets could really help move things along.
If someone listening is really wanting to learn more about design thinking, entrepreneurship, any of the things we've talked about, what should they do?
I think the easiest way is just to go to biz.colostate.edu, biz.colostate.edu. That'll get you to anything community entrepreneurship, K-12 entrepreneurship. It'll get you at least into the right zip code to start digging around. And there's summer programs, there's community programs, there's accelerator programs, there's incubator programs, there's connected rural or urban programs. There's so many different things out there. And if that's not on the page, there's a contact information for somebody that can get you to somebody else in Fort Collins or Colorado, at least, that we know. Because this ecosystem's big, and it's not real competitive turf war right now. It's been very friendly and very much like, hey, we know this system works to get passionate people expressing their passion through business and solving problems that are out there. We know that this is important, so how can we arm each other? And so the conference I was just at had CU Boulder and CSU, and we were both presenting, talking about how do we help youth entrepreneurship. Yep. So go on there. It's probably the easiest way.
Thanks for being here.
You bet. Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Applied. If you'd like to learn more, consider visiting CSU's Institute for Entrepreneurship, which offers programs like the Venture Validator and the Student Venture Accelerator. For those seeking postgraduate continuing education, be sure to check out CSU's online graduate certificate in human-centered design thinking. Links to both are in the show notes.